My name is Jack Walker, and this ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. Every fence, every pasture, and every drop of water belongs to this land, not the HOA that sprang up next door years later. I never imagined turning off my own water would become the biggest controversy in the county. The neighboring subdivision loved using water from the small canal that crossed the edge of my property. Most people assumed it was public, but the original property deed clearly stated the entire irrigation system belonged to my ranch. For years, I allowed the water to keep flowing because it helped everyone during the hot Texas summers. I never charged anyone a penny, believing that good neighbors respected one another without needing written agreements. Everything changed after Linda Parker became HOA president. Within weeks, she acted as though the ranch existed only to serve the subdivision, making demands instead of asking for cooperation. She insisted that the canal was community property, simply because it supplied water near the neighborhood. I calmly explained that the recorded deed, county maps, and water rights all showed otherwise. I wasn't interested in arguments, so I simply decided to perform routine maintenance on my private irrigation system. That meant shutting off the main valve for a few hours while replacing several aging control components. Within 30 minutes, sprinklers across the neighboring subdivision stopped running. Perfectly green lawns began drying under the Texas sun, and homeowners immediately started asking the HOA what had happened. Linda Parker stormed onto the edge of my property, demanding that I restore the water immediately. She insisted I had no right to interrupt what she called a community utility. I politely explained that I was repairing equipment on private property and that the water would return once the work was finished. Instead of listening, she pulled out her phone and threatened to call the authorities. I went back to replacing the old valve without raising my voice. A few minutes later, I noticed sheriff's deputies driving toward the ranch entrance, responding to a call that never should have been made. Sheriff Reynolds walked over without making assumptions. Instead of rushing conclusions, he introduced himself, listened to both sides, and asked a simple question: who owns the water system? I walked into my ranch office and returned with a binder containing the original deed, county survey maps, and water rights documents. Every page clearly showed the canal and main control valve were part of my private property. Sheriff Reynolds compared the documents with the digital county property records on his patrol computer. After several minutes, he nodded and confirmed that the legal descriptions matched perfectly. The sheriff explained that routine maintenance on privately owned equipment was completely lawful. Since there was no emergency and no evidence of wrongdoing, there was no basis for any enforcement action. With the misunderstanding resolved, the deputies thanked everyone for their cooperation. As they prepared to leave, I finished installing the new valve so the irrigation system could safely return to normal operation. By evening, water was flowing through the canal again, and the subdivision's irrigation system returned to normal. Most homeowners never knew the interruption had simply been scheduled maintenance on privately owned equipment. The following morning, several homeowners stopped by the ranch to ask what had actually happened. After seeing the property records and hearing the full story, they thanked me for explaining everything respectfully. Together, we walked along the canal while I explained how the irrigation system had served the ranch for decades. Many were surprised to learn how much planning and maintenance was required to keep it operating safely. Later that week, the HOA board requested a meeting to discuss future communication whenever maintenance was scheduled. We agreed that better communication would help avoid unnecessary confusion in the future. As I drove back across the ranch that evening, I smiled knowing the issue had been resolved through patience, facts, and respectful conversation. Protecting my property never meant creating conflict. It simply meant standing by the truth. A few weeks later, the County Water Resources Department invited nearby property owners to attend an informational meeting about private water rights and irrigation systems. I accepted the invitation, hoping the discussion would help everyone better understand how the system actually worked. During the presentation, the county engineer explained how privately owned irrigation canals often cross multiple properties, while remaining under the ownership of the original ranch. Many residents admitted they had never realized how those legal agreements worked. After the meeting, several neighbors thanked me for always keeping the irrigation system in good condition. They said they had never appreciated how much work went into maintaining miles of canals, valves, and pumps until now. The HOA board later proposed creating a direct communication plan, so residents would receive advance notice whenever maintenance affected the canal. I agreed, believing clear communication benefits everyone. That evening, I stood beside the reservoir as the sun disappeared behind the hills. Looking across the flowing water, I realized the real lesson wasn't about shutting off a valve. It was about respecting property, understanding the facts, and working together as neighbors. The following month, the county invited local ranchers and neighborhood representatives to tour the irrigation system. I demonstrated how every valve, pump, and canal required regular inspections to keep the water flowing safely and efficiently. One engineer complimented the condition of the irrigation equipment, noting that decades of careful maintenance had preserved the original system remarkably well. Hearing that made me proud of the work my family had invested over the years. After the tour, several HOA residents volunteered to help keep the shared canal banks clean by reporting fallen branches and debris. The new partnership made routine maintenance much easier for everyone.